Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why and how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio, and today, man, I'm excited. Damn it, I'm excited. I'm really excited. I got Brent Adamson on tap right now, and I'm super excited. Now, if you don't know who he is, I'll be surprised if you don't know who he is. But anyway, let me just bring him in right now. Brent, how you doing this morning?
I am great, Victor. It's so good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah. And by the way, that still always happens. It gives me that mellow voice, but I know he's more exciting than that. So I can juice him during this conversation to get some real information.
Oh, you'll get me fired up eventually.
Say, Brent, for people who perchance don't know who you are, give us the 1 minute bio and don't be bashful.
Well, it's actually for people that I know pretty well, like you, Victor. There's assumption that people actually do know who I am, and what I find when I go to like Dreamforce or Inbound or big conferences, nobody knows who I am. So which is totally fine. But but they know the book. So the book is The Challenger Sale. So I'm one of the two co-authors of the book called The Challenger Sale, and that's subsequent or a sequel, The Challenger Customer, which we published while Matt and I were at CEB, which is of course now part of Gartner. Back in the early 2010s, I guess, 2011s when the first one came out. I am now out on my own after kind of wandering through the desert for a little bit and doing some different things, but I've got a new book coming out and I was excited to share it with you, Victor, and come talk to you about it. And that's who I am.
I love it.
There you go.
So let's step back in time because I want to do this with you because I
absolutely.
know I can do this with you. The reason I get excited about talking to you, and I've talked to Matt, obviously, is that when I talk to you, I feel like I'm talking to sales brethren, like real people who understand sales. And so I want to take you back before we leap forward to your new book. And I want to take you back to Neil Rackham's book, Spin Selling. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward over to the Challenger Sale because Neil Rackham wrote the foreword. Am I right?
Yep, he did. Yeah.
And I was blown away by that because I've studied Neil Rackham. Can you talk a little bit about spin selling back in the day, and then fast forward to the Challenger Sale before we leap forward?
So there's kind of I think it's a funny story, but what happened was we'd written the Challenger. I don't know if we'd written the book yet, but we'd certainly been out present. So we actually did the original research for the Challenger Sale in 2008 and published it and presented it to what we called our members, that is the clients of CEB, heads of sales around the world, in 2009. And we went on about a year run. I traveled. That was my job. I traveled all over the world presenting our research. And over that time, it began to resonate like nothing else we'd ever produced in the years prior to that. And so there's a day when I walked into Matt's office and said, I think we should write a book about this. And he agreed, and the rest is history. But somewhere in that time, this is when YouTube was, remember, YouTube's like there was a time when YouTube was still like this tiny little thing and it was kind of up and coming. But so I don't know how we found out, but someone brought to our attention videos on YouTube of Neil Rackham, out presenting the Challenger research in workshops he was doing, but with a Huthwaite logo on the slides. And we're like, dude, that's not cool. And by the way, this ends happily, I promise. So I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus. So we actually just reached out to Neil and said, hey, we'd like to just tell you more about our research and what's going on and give you help you think about how you might cite our work for it and all that kind of stuff. And he was very open. It turns out Neil lives at the time, I think he still does. He has a writing cottage, Victor. Not all of us have a writing cottage. Writing cottage is code for wait a minute. He has a writing cottage. He literally has a home dedicated to where he could just go and it's a retreat. It's beautiful. It's a modest but very nice home, and it's about 15 miles that way. So it's like very close to where I am in just south of Leesburg, Virginia.
By the way, have you visited? Have you been there?
Yeah. So he invited us out to the writing cottage, and so we went and spent a day walking through. Matt and I went out there, and we spent a day just walking through all the research. We went downtown Leesburg and got Chinese lunch. It's really little dive place that I didn't even know existed, even though it's my hometown now. And that kind of led to this really kind of neat working relationship for the better part of 4 or 5 years, where among other things, he agreed to write the foreword to the book. One of the things Victor said at that lunch was really interesting to me, and then Matt and I didn't really appreciate at the time. He says, you guys, first of all, he was very complimentary. He says, what you're sitting on is really profound and incredibly important, and it's just a nice build from what I've been doing. But he said, this thing is going to stick around for a lot longer than you possibly can imagine. He says, I know you're thinking about writing a book and people read it for a year or two and then kind of move on. But he says, this is going to stick around. And here we are 15 years later. Isn't that crazy? And just to this morning, there was 2 posts about, you've got to read this book called The Challenger Sale on LinkedIn. It's like, So to some degree, Victor, I was like, really, people are still just finding this.
No,
It's been out for forever.
I don't think you appreciate it. I'm sure you do, but I'm just saying from the outside perspective, looking in, right? Because you're inside the challenger bubble, if I could say it that way.
Yeah.
Is that when I look at milestone of books, right?
Yeah.
Like Spin Selling, the Neil Rackham.
Yeah.
That was, I guess, sponsored by Xerox at the time. I think it was.
It was.
I remember Spin Selling as being a great book. He followed up with Major Account Selling, another great book. But Spin Selling, and I remember when I read the Challenger Sale, because people kept recommending it. I'm like, oh, another sales book, and a couple of guys I had never heard of writing a damn sales book, right? And so, and I was talking to, I think it was Medtronic at the time, and they're like, oh my God, we're just starting the Challenger Sale. I'm like, okay, let me go read this book. And I swear to you, Brent, I think I went through the book 2, maybe 3 times. I think 2 times right away, then put it down for, let's say, 6 months. I came back to it again. And because don't know if you know this, but I have an electrical engineering degree. And so I am a nerd at heart. And there was data in there. And it wasn't conjecture, anecdote. It was real data. And so to this day, I still promote your book.
Thank you.
It's like I said, you got to read the book, and I had a chance to present with Matt at an event. And that was a pleasure to meet him personally. Look forward to meeting you one day. Yeah. But I think it is a seminal piece of work. It really is, and I think that will be like a touchstone for anybody who understands sales. Spin Selling, the Challenger Sale, to me, like ultimate touchstones in sales.
I'd say we got lucky, we did, but we also worked our butts off. And by the way, it wasn't just, Matt and I had the pleasure and privilege of being able to put our names on the front of that book, but there's a whole team of people behind it that,
screw them. We don't care about them. We just care about you.
I do. They're friends of mine, but collectively what we produced is, it was kind of lightning in a bottle. The story was the right story at the right time in the right place. And in many ways, I kind of feel that way about this new work too, which we can get to in a minute if you like. But it's humbling, I think, Victor, more than anything else. I knew the way it was resonating, it was going to be important and it was going to have an impact. We had no idea it was going to have the impact it did. And when people come up to you and say things like, this book changed my career, it's like, I'm successful because I read this book. And I always tell them, like, no, you're successful because you work hard and you did the right things. It's not because of anything I did. But but it's
be proud of the work. Be very proud of the work.
I am. I'm very humble. I really am, because I grew up in Nebraska, so we're just kind of how we're raised. But I'm also very deeply appreciative of the fact that people find the value in the work, which is very cool.
No, it's a great book. I wanted to ask you some questions because talking to you is going to be great.
By the way, have we not met in person? We've never met in person. Is that right?
We've never met personally. You've ignored me. You've probably walked away the other way when you saw me coming, something like that. But I wanted to ask you.
Yeah,
Brent, you wrote an article that I think was not read by a lot of people, and I don't know if it was an article or study. I think you were still at CEB. It was on sense making, and this is kind of the on ramp to Framemaking. So talk about sense making, because when I read that paper that you published, I think it was a paper or study. I'm like, this deserves a book.
Yeah.
And so talk about sense making before we jump into your new book.
So what we did at CB is every year we do one large sort of landmark study. And this is one of the last ones we did right before we got acquired by Gartner. So like 2018 or so. And that in fact is, it's an HBR article now. It's called Sense Making for Sales. And it came out in HBR and Harvard Business Review in 2021, 2022, one of those two.
Probably.
And the whole idea, Victor, was what we wanted to start with was we want to look at information, or if you want content, trying to understand what's the impact is the fact that we're producing huge amounts of content and information and customers becoming overwhelmed by it. And this is all pre-pandemic, and this is all pre-AI, way pre-AI, right? So like fast forward today, it's like yes, and right? It's like even more. But the thing that we found in SenseMaking was really interesting is that it starts with a very powerful, it's like this disarmingly simple, seemingly uninteresting data point, which when you unpack it's really powerful, which is when we surveyed thousands of B2B buyers of complex purchases and asked them, to what degree did you find the information that you encountered as part of this purchase to be of high quality? 89% said yes. So 89%, and we did it again a couple of years later, I think it was like 92. So somewhere around 90% of the buyers, it's virtually all of them, have told us, the content that we encountered as part of this purchase was generally of high quality. And if you stop, Victor, and ask, like, what does that mean? Like, what does high quality mean? It means it was relevant. It was backed by data, had evidence. It was delivered in a channel that I find, resonates with me, that I find accessible. It was helpful to me and understanding, like, it's all goodness, right? But if you think about what that means, it's actually kind of interesting, because from a customer's perspective, it's like all this information out there is like, there's a lot of information out there and it's all pretty good. It's a very different scenario than the early Challenger days, because in the early Challenger days, what really set Challenger apart, because if you think of the heart and soul of Challenger, it's really an information strategy, right? It's a content strategy. It's a show up with commercial insight that reframes the way your customers think about their business. And as you know, back in 2011, when most of us were showing up with features and benefits and speeds and feeds and sort of a supplier-centric kind of narrative, to have a story that you could share with the customer that wasn't about our company, but about their company, ways they could make and save money, that's Challenger in a nutshell, that was really remarkably differentiated. But I think what's really interesting to me is that somewhere around, and you and I were there for it, somewhere around 2013, 2014, I think every CEO in the world woke up on the same morning. I think it was a Tuesday. I don't know. And they all looked in the mirror and they were all struggling with the same, as they are today, right? They were all struggling with the same challenge, which is, how do we stand out? How do we differentiate? How do we command, disproportionately large margins in the marketplace? We also think fancy sounding, right? And it's kind of, they all looked in the mirror and said, I got it. I have an idea. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to become a thought leader. And that was their strategy. It's like everyone decided, we're going to become a thought leader and we're going to stand out and demonstrate to our customers that we just know more than everybody else. We have better data, we have better information, we have better insights, and we're going to deliver that in more compelling fashion than ever before, so that our customers see us as smart and trusted, as we become the trusted advisor. So we'll be the first one they come to whenever they have a challenge. And so marketing got on board with this and said, oh, well, I've got a strategy for that. We could do that. We're going to call that content marketing. And then out of Boston rose this company called HubSpot, says, I got technology for that. We'll call it marketing automation. And so for the next 5 to 6 years, it was what I call the smartness arms race. Everyone's producing large quantities of high quality content in order to stand out. And ironically, I think where it landed is a place where the smartness arms race ended in a tie. And the only people to lose are your customers, because now it's like, whereas from a customer's perspective, it used to be sort of separating wheat from chaff or signal from noise. Like, there's a lot of information out there. Let me find the good stuff. Now it's like, there's a lot of information out there and it's all good. Now what do I do? And so,
Brent, let me pause you right here. I know you're on the road, but I got to pause you right because I want to make sure everybody's catching.
I told you I'd get there.
No, that's okay. Because again, what happened was when the Challenger sale came out, in that book, there were several data points. The biggest one was to provide insight, right?
Yeah.
Give them information they don't know, position yourself as a trusted advisor. And then, as you said, around 2013, every CEO woke up on a Tuesday and they started creating content, right?
Yeah.
And then you said something interesting, and I think you said information or insight has become table stakes. I think it's a phrase you used.
Yeah.
And I said, in other words, everybody has to have at least this much information out there. And so now all this information is created, which leads us to the next part, which is now there's so much information flooding the market, so much great information.
Yeah.
Take it from there.
So what do you do? Like, this whole strategy, this content strategy, was at its heart was an effort to differentiate, right? And by the way, whether you were on the Challenger journey and we're doing this through Challenger, or you didn't ever even heard of Challenger, you still want to be a thought leader. One way or another, we're all producing all these high quantities of high quality content. And so the very thing that we set, that we pursued to set ourselves apart, just makes us look the same as everyone else. We knew this from data, right? That's unpacked in the article and in the book now too. So this is one of the chapters in the book, which is, somewhere it's roughly about 60% of customers say that, there's a lot of great information out there, but it all kind of looks the same. 75%, just under 75% said there's a lot of information out there. It's really good, but it's really overwhelming. But I think the one that's most interesting, Victor, was roughly 61, 62% of customers we surveyed said, it's really high quality information, but it's contradictory, right? So in other words, you're telling me to zig and they're telling me to zag. And you think, well, that's the heart and soul of challengers. Everyone's telling them to zig, you tell them to zag. I'm challenging you, right? But if you think about where it is, like when all that information is data backed, then you've got a problem. In fact, this happened in Palo Alto. I was presenting this work, the sense-making work, originally in Palo Alto. When head of sales, literally, I was going through the very stats I just went through, and one of the heads of sales there interrupted the meeting. He said, but Brent, hold on, stop for a minute. Is it, we did what you told us to do. It's like, oh God, this never ends well. It's like, I did what you told me to do. So we built a challenger message and we're out there challenging our customers. Yeah. We got completely differentiated story. All of our competitors are telling our customers to zig and we're telling them to zag. And I said, that's great. But think about it from the customer's perspective. This is like the moment of empathy, Victor, right? It's like is from a customer's perspective, if you're telling me to zig and you've got data, you've got research, you've got experts, but they're telling me to zag and they've got data, they've got research, and they've got experts. Now I don't know what to do. I'm just confused at a higher level, right? And it's like, and if you show up with a commercial insight in that environment, you're right. You need to have something. You don't want to unilaterally disarm in a smartness arms race. So you got to have a take and a perspective. But in many ways, like, great, I'll take your commercial insight and put on the stack with all the other commercial insights, and I'll kind of work through it. Why don't you call me in 6 months after I've had a time to kind of give it some thought? And by the way, your customers never really want them to call you back in 6 months. And so what we found in the sense making, to get to the punchline, and it does set up frame making, which is the seller who wins in this context, in this world, what we found is, first of all, you have to have an information strategy. That's not something that's ever come up in sales before, right? So it's like we have a opportunity qualification strategy, we have a segmentation strategy, but an information strategy, I don't know what that is. But what we found is sort of there's three approaches to providing customers with information: is giving, telling, and sense making. So giving is just, I call it indiscriminate generosity. It's like, you think my value as a seller is simply to give you information. If you want more, I'll give you more, because that's how I add value. The telling seller is the expert. I've been doing this for 30 years. Let me tell you what you need to do. And it turns out both those strategies actually make things worse. They confuse customers. They make them feel overwhelmed in just different ways. But the sense-making seller is the one that shows up, says, and just acknowledges, first of all, one, the challenge. There's a lot of information out there. It's overwhelming. And then two, they acknowledge the context, that whatever insight I'm providing you has to exist in the context of everything else that you're reading and everything else you're consuming. And so the sense-making conversation starts a little differently. It sounds a little bit like, there's a lot of information out there, isn't it? Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming, isn't it? Yeah, I know, it's really kind of confusing. Let me see if I can help you just kind of think of ways to just make sense out of all of it and focus on the questions that are going to matter most for you. And then we can figure out where that makes sense for you to land. And so I'm starting with help. I'm starting with acknowledging this is hard. And I'm starting by helping you just make sense out of all of it, which I've kind of raised up. So if challenge was all about this is literally, I was out walking the dog about 2 years ago, and it's like, well, if challenge was all about being frame breaking, which I still stand by, I think is right in context. I think what's really the big opportunity to stand out today isn't to be frame breaking, but to be frame making, right? To be the person that shows up and says, let me take all these things that are hard and overwhelming and put a frame around it to help you, sort of help not tell you what to do, but help you be in a better position where you have agency to make your own decision, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. And then that led to a question like, so what else are customers overwhelmed with besides information? And then it's like, I think there's about 4 things. And then that ultimately led to the book. So frame making is this idea of how do I take things that are big and hard and overwhelming and applying this frame making approach to each of them such that customers feel more confident, not in you, but in themselves to make a decision.
Because it's, one of the beatings you guys took when you came up with the Challenger sale is that, remember that I think the stat was 57% of buyers are into the buying cycle.
Yeah.
And then people ran with that and said, salespeople are no longer needed. And I'm like, I don't think that's what they meant. As kind of my head said, I don't think that's what they meant. And so fast forward, what you're saying, even if the buyer is 80, 90, 95% into the buying cycle, obviously there gets a point where they need help. So walk me through the frame making philosophy, and let's start there.
Okay, so the frame-making philosophy, and by the way, I call it a mindset for what it's worth. Real quick, and you'll appreciate this given your just incredible deep expertise in this world. I have zero interest, Victor, and I mean this sincerely, I have zero interest in bringing in another sales methodology to market. That's not what this book is for. That's not what I'm trying to do. But it is a mindset. It's an approach. It's a set of tactics and tools that I think are critically important. I think the word methodology over-promises and under-delivers. It was never my intention for Challenger to ever become a methodology. I used to just say, it's research. That's all it is. And as you know, it kind of became, the market turned it into a methodology. I'm going to try to avoid that with frame making. It's a footnote and aside, but I think it's an important one. So people can see how this slots into everything else that they're doing. But frame making starts with like so much in my life, and at least in my professional life, it starts with a bar chart. And it starts with a bar chart. That's one of the most interesting things we ever found while we were still doing this kind of research at CEB Gartner, which is trying to understand what are the drivers of a high quality, low regret purchase, a purchase where the customer buys the bigger solution with the broader scope, with the higher price point, but nonetheless feels better about it at the same time.
By the way, you say that so quickly because you know it so well, but I want you to say that line. What is it? High value, low regret.
A high quality, low regret deal, or a high quality, low regret purchase, if you want to think about it from the customer's perspective. So it's a bigger deal. I don't settle for status quo. I don't settle for the small pilot. I buy the bigger scope deal, probably with the higher price point, higher margins for you. And usually, as you know, when you buy these big, complex, high involvement purchases, that comes with a certain amount of buyer's remorse or purchase regret. So we wanted to say, I want to do all that. I want to buy that bigger deal, but I don't feel good about it at the same time. It's like the unicorn. It's like, how does that supposed to happen?
Yeah.
And so,
by the way, you're the first person, at least for me, that I heard use the low regret with that combination. And that's why I kind of want to emphasize, because we don't think about that, especially when it comes to B2B sales.
Totally. Yeah. And it's critically important because, of course, in B2B sales, like so many other places in sales, we're trying to not just win a customer, but keep a customer and expand a customer over time, right? So if hunting becomes farming and expansion, and certainly in the SaaS world, the expansion of existing customers becomes the bigger opportunity. But all of that's unlikely if customers buy it and hate it, or buy it, more importantly, they buy it and hate themselves, which is, sign me up for that. I've been there with all sorts of things I bought, right? So, you know what I mean? Because when you make a mistake,
it's funny the way you said it. They hate themselves. Like you know, after you make the purchase, you send them to a psychologist. It's okay.
No, but Victor, I'm not, this isn't just tongue-in-cheek sort of fun for podcasts. I think that's legitimate. At the heart of these B2B purchases is something very deeply human, right? If you buy a CRM system on behalf of your company with 10 of your colleagues and it turns out to be a disaster, are you going to hate the CRM system? Yeah, probably. But are you going to hate yourself for making that decision? Yeah, probably even more. There's a certain amount of shame that comes with that we don't talk to. And you know what happens the next time you have to go buy a new CRM system? Boy, you're going to be a lot more careful. You're going to take a lot more time. You're going to slow this thing down, and maybe you just hold off a little bit, right? And that's what we're finding, is that when you go and study what are the drivers of a high quality, low regret purchase, it turns out, maybe not surprisingly, but nonetheless very interestingly, the single biggest driver by far, Victor, statistically, by far, I know that's is not a wonky term, it's an order of magnitude if you want the wonky version, but the single biggest driver is the degree to which customers report a high level of confidence in the decision that they're making on behalf of their company. We call this decision confidence. When customers report a high level of decision confidence, the likelihood of winning a high quality, low regret deal doesn't go up by 10% or 100%. It goes up by 10x. It's like 900%. And everything else we've said, we've run all the challenger attributes through this model. We've run, different sort of marketing strategies with different configurations of the buying group. We've run just about everything that you can imagine through this model. Nothing else comes even remotely close to just the degree to which customers are confident. Like which makes sense, right? If we don't feel good about this decision, we're going to choose not to choose. We're going to study more. We're going to look at it longer. We're going to put it off. We're going to go to some other higher priority.
I don't want to put you too much on a pedestal, because then you get a big head, don't want to talk to me anymore.
No. Trust me. I literally just brought in the trash can here, so I'm good.
But you were also like, and I think it was in sense making, because it's something we don't think about, Brent. Is that, and give me the phrasing, and I'll just tell you what I think I remember. Is that it's not about buyers having the confidence to make a decision. It's having decisions, having the confidence in themselves to make the buying decision. And it's, and you've already stated that, but I wanted to emphasize it for the listening or watching, viewing audience, is that's key today. That it's not about whether they want to buy or not. Many reasons why they pull back or hold back or defer, it's because they don't have the confidence in themselves to push 100%. The buying decision forward, which is where you as a salesperson come in.
And this is where, and I think this is such an important point. The old thing we all used to ask in sales, Matt and I wrote a blog post and called it the single worst question you can ask in sales is what's keeping you up at night? Just because that's a whole nother episode. Let's not do that right now. But I'll tell you what keeps me up at night. Not that anyone asks or anyone cares, but besides the fact I'm a 56-year-old man and, you have to pee every 10 minutes, but that's a different story again. Sorry, too much information. But the thing that keeps me up at night is what I call the false positive problem, which is when people hear your research, this reframe, this new idea, this new perspective, say, oh yeah, that's really smart. In fact, we work on that a lot. We do that already. And what's interesting is the reason I mention that here is because this is exactly what happens often when I show this confidence data, right? When we talk about the single highest or biggest driver of a high quality, low regret deal is the degree to which customers are confident in the decisions they're making on behalf of the company. A lot of, particularly CEOs, MDs, exec leaders, what I find is that their reaction isn't like, oh my God, their reaction is like, well, yeah, of course. Like it's kind of this no duh moment. It was like, of course, if customers aren't confident in what they're doing, they're going to choose not to choose. And I'd say, I'd agree with you. And here's what they do next. They'll say, and no disrespect at all, but what they'll say next, Victor, is that's why we need to make sure that everything we do is ensuring that customers are confident in our company, in our brand, in our people, in our product. Everything that we have to do has got to go through this lens of making sure that customers truly are confident in us more than they're confident in anyone else. And that's where I would always say, hopefully with respect, I don't disagree with you, but that's not what this is about. That's not what this data is about at all. Because when you unpack so the sort of the sub attributes, to get kind of wonky again, of decision confidence, it's things like, from the buying perspective, Victor, it's like, how confident are we that we even ask the right questions? Which, by the way, in a world like today where everything is changing so fast, and whether it's politics, economics, or of course technology with AI, it's hard to know whether you're asking even the right questions, right? Like, think about the first time you bought a home, for those who are homeowners, or like picking a college for your kid, or working with your kid to pick a college, right? It's like, I don't even know what questions to ask, right? So it really slows things down. How confident are you that you thoroughly explored alternatives? How confident are you that you've done sufficient research? And what's interesting, there's two things about this I find really interesting, Victor. One is, if you unpack each of those dimensions, the first thing you find is none of them have what I would call an objective finish line. Which questions are the right questions? Are those the right ones? Are those the right ones? Okay, that's hard. I don't know what right means. So okay, well, how confident are we did sufficient research? What does sufficient mean? Is it an hour? Is it a day? Is it a month? Is it a year? It's like, I think for me, sufficient simply means if the deal went south after you bought it, that wasn't sufficient, right? So and what does thorough mean? And you go through this whole list, and everyone has got this weird thing, like you can't define an objective finish line. And what that tells me is, in sales, Victor, we're so hell-bent on focusing on what we want our customers to know. We need them to know this about our company, that we need them to know this about our product, about our ROI, about the total cost of ownership. We need to know, or in Challenger, we need them to know this about their company, but it's all very knowing based, right? But if you unpack these dimensions of self-confidence, the thing that matters most is you find you can't know any of them. You can't know that those are the right questions. You can't know the research was sufficient. You don't know it, you feel it. And so here we are in this really interesting moment where the single biggest driver of a high quality, low regret deal isn't based on something you know, it's based on something you feel, which is, do you feel confident? And then the second dimension that's so interesting is none of those dimensions have anything to do with supplier at all. How confident are we that we asked the right questions? How confident are we that we did sufficient research? And so then it becomes this really interesting moment where, and this is literally, not that anyone cares, but I literally quit my job. And I tell people all the time, I'm all in right now. I am completely all in. I just don't know if I'm all in on red or black yet. The market will tell me. But the thing that we're all, I think, walking past right now is this massive opportunity that we see in the data and we see anecdotally now, which is, what if our engagement strategy, what if our go-to-market model wasn't so much to be focused on changing the way customers think about us, our company, our product, our people, to become a trusted advisor, which I think is still a noble thing to try to do, but I think there's a better way to do it. What if our primary purpose and our primary engagement strategy was to engage customers such that our engagement didn't change the way they think about us, but changes the way they think about themselves? What would that even look like? What would it look like to lean into a sales interaction that was specifically designed to help customers feel better about themselves? And that's the book. So as I thought that out, and so that became Framemaking, which became the book, which is why we're here talking today. And I think, to me, it's not a stop-start. Like, you still want to have them think positive thoughts about your company? Absolutely. But the best way to get them to think positive thoughts about your company or product and you personally is to be the one that shows up to help them feel better about themselves. It's exactly the same as high school dating, isn't it? It always is. Everything comes back to dating in high school, which, if you want to get a great date in high school, help the person you're trying to date feel better about themselves. Trust me, it'll work. I didn't, fortunately, figure that out until after high school. It's like date in high school, but that's all right. It's a long
what I love about this, I mean, there's so many things to unpack here in what you just said.
Yeah.
And that is that you're almost looking at
but you don't want to touch. I know.
No, what I love about this conversation. So I've been doing this podcast since 2008, I think. And so the subtitle of Sales Influence is Finding the Why in How People Buy. So I've always been interested, ever since I read Cialdini's book, Influence, on psychology, behavioral economics, and things of that nature. Totally. And what you're saying really is reminiscent with that. In other words, we got the left side figured out, right? All the logical things we need to say, as you say, ROI, TCO, whatever it may be. Yeah. He says, but there's something within the psyche of the individual. And I go back to one of your examples, is that if the person bought a bad CRM 3 years ago, for example, the new salesperson arriving has to deal with that psychological baggage of what was there before. And so go a little deeper on that, because I think that's really fascinating. In fact, I want you to set it up this way, because you had a story in another podcast. I feel like you cheated on me, by the way. So you had a story in another podcast where you talk about, I think you were looking for some dog food or treatment for your dog. Dude, see, I study you, man. I know you're one. It's like, damn, he actually knows that story. So I want you to tell that story And then walk the audience through the psychological process you went to try to make that decision.
Sure. So my co-author, Carl Schmidt, and I are doing we're essentially breaking down the book in a series of about 11-minute videos, which of course are too long because everyone has a attention span of 10 seconds, but we're putting them up on YouTube under the Framemaking sale. So, and this is where we talked about this, because this actually literally happened to me the other day, because there's a really interesting question about, of course, we live in the world of AI. And by the way, when we started this book, AI hadn't exploded like it has now. So it's like we've had to adapt. It's really interesting, Victor, as a footnote. If you go through the book and do a word search for AI, you'll only find it once in the entire book. But I think that actually works well for us. And here's why.
Hey, Brent, can I just throw you in? I got to throw this in only because this is,
go ahead.
So this is self-gratification at this point. I wrote the first AI book in sales in 2017. Sales Ex Machina. How AI is transforming the world. 2017, that's 4 years before ChatGPT. And I think I sold maybe, on the high side, 50 copies. And now everybody's in AI. I feel
so not only are you way ahead of everyone else, you're also the best dressed man in the sales profession. So I mean, like, you got two things going for you. But it's like
all right, I want to hear this dog story. Give me the dog story.
Good, because otherwise I was going to go on a long riff about your wardrobe, which is just so on point. But anyway, that's God. Every time I see you online, it's like, God, I got to dress like that guy. But anyway, a true story. Like so many of these days, the other night I was flipping through, I don't know, I think it was Instagram, just completely lost and just wasting time doing reels. And the algorithm kind of figured me out and figured out that I have a dog, a rescue dog. It's very cute. And like every rescue dog in the world, ours has still just some mild digestive issues. And so all of a sudden, I'm getting all these advertisements for like, human grade dog food and artisanal dog food. And I'm thinking, like, maybe I'm not a very good dog owner. Maybe I should do good by my dog and get my dog better dog food. And I say, I'm not a very good person. I should be better at this. All the other kinds of things, you beat yourself up. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to AI and I'm going to essentially RFP dog food, artisanal dog food, just the same way that people might use AI today to write an RFP for like a CRM system. And so I was really excited to do this. I think it was Copilot that I was using at the time. Not that the others wouldn't have done the exact same thing, but it's like I put all these specs in a prompt about dog food and artisanal, and asked it to tell me about the quality of the food and the service delivery and the service reputation and pricing. And then I asked it to put it all on the table for me and make a recommendation. And it did all that because it's freaking AI, right? So it did a table, put it all together. And I got all excited, Victor, because unlike you, I haven't been doing this since 2017. So I was like, oh, look at me. I made a table in AI. It's like so advanced. This is what happens when you're my age. And it's like, anyway. So I took it down to my wife and there it was all laid out in all the different categories. And it's exactly what you'd want if you're buying, say, a CRM system or anything else in B2B, right? Is all the different advantages and disadvantages laid out with the pricing structure and then an actual recommendation. Based on all this, we think you should buy brand X. And I looked at that and I looked at my wife and said, well, what do you think we should do? And she said, I don't know. So what do you think we should do? And I said, I don't know. It would be nice if we could just talk to somebody about this. And it was interesting and we took that little table that we created with AI and we set it on the kitchen counter. Quite literally, it's right over there in the kitchen. It's still sitting there, like a month later, and we never did anything with it. And I thought, to me, that was such an interesting moment because, as AI got you right up to the finish line. And what I realized is I kind of just want to talk to other dog owners who've been in the situation and kind of get their thoughts. It's like, it's not that I didn't trust AI. It just wasn't sufficient. It's like, okay, that's what Copilot thinks, but what do humans think, right? And that moment right there, I think is still the moment. That window is the window of opportunity for sales professionals today, because so much of that can be done with AI, but so much of it leaves this little moment, this little opportunity for your customer to say, awesome, I just wish I could talk to somebody about this. And if you're the person that shows up in that moment and says, well, let me go into more depth about my product and service, you've just lost a massive opportunity to be the one person that shows up differently and says, let me just help you out with this. Here's kind of how, and we go through all this in the book about using things like social proof. So you don't really care about my opinion. What you care about is the experiences of other people, other leaders, other companies like yours. And so my role is not to be the expert, but to be the connector, to bring to you, because what sellers have that is so valuable isn't expertise. What sellers have that's so valuable is access. They have access to other companies like this one, and that they can bring those stories to bear and say, working with other companies like you, we call this the phrase that frames. And working with other companies like you, one of the things we found that's really surprising is that there's kind of two questions that oftentimes haven't come up, but probably should, because if you don't acknowledge them, they can kind of blow up in your face. And there's a lot out there, but really, since we've learned, it kind of boils down to these three things. That was a little awkward, but you hopefully get the idea.
No, by the way, that was good. I love that. I actually wrote that down. The phrase that frames, dude. That is
the phrase that frames.
I
Yeah,
like
and
that.
by the way, in the book, I call it the phrase that pays, and I realized later that was just too crass. So we call it the phrase that frames now. So
The phrase
we'll
that
catch
frames.
that on the second printing. Yeah,
I'll use that, and I'll make sure I attribute that to you, because I love that, because I think it is about framing. What's interesting is that I've always looked at confidence as almost like a differential. I'm gonna run my theory by you. Why not? I got an opportunity. Here it comes. Okay, so I want you to imagine. Okay, here it comes, Brent. Let me see if this passes the Adamson test. So if you think of a revenue line and a cost line, revenue cost, right? The difference between that is profit margin, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, if you replace the revenue line with certainty and the cost line with anxiety, the difference, I call it, is a confidence margin. And our job, like in business, is to increase their certainty and reduce their anxiety, which thereby increases their confidence margin.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I like it. I like it a lot. Here's the thing, though, and this is actually no criticism of anything you just said, which I'm bought in. But again, it's the false positive problem. Because what I find, this is why I'm just going to be hell bent for the next couple of years, is trying to get this idea out of the world.
Brent. Give it to me.
Which is, when people hear what you just said, they'll say, "You're right, Victor." They'll look you right in the eyes and say, "You're absolutely right." And that's why we need to help customers feel more confident in who we are. It's just the gravitational pull back to a supplier-centric conversation is so strong, it's almost unavoidable, right? So this whole idea of essentially, so what we talk a lot about in the book isn't so much being customer-centric, it's being supplier agnostic. Right? Is how do I think about that confidence margin you just described so nicely? I think it's a great metaphor. Is again, it's just in a broken record, annoying sort of Brent, we get it sort of way, which is
right.
It's not confidence in you, it's customers' confidence in themselves.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the opportunity.
Talk about this agnostic, this supplier agnostic approach.
Yeah.
Give that some more texture.
So this is something that actually I landed on personally, just watching the research of Challenger all those years ago, because the whole idea of Challenger, so for those who know it, is this idea: don't lead with your unique strengths, but lead to them, right? So the conversation we have with your customers that reframes their thinking isn't about you at all. It's about their business, how they can make or save money. And that was the first time it kind of came sort of be very clear to me that the single best conversation you can have with your customer isn't about you at all. It's about them. And that always led to one of these, as you know, Victor, one of these core questions of Challenger, which is, but Brent, how do I get paid for that? Right? How do I avoid the free consulting trap of I show up and reframe their thinking, and then someone takes that idea and puts it out to RFP, and my competitor wins the business? So we spend a lot of time in Challenger talking about whatever you teach them about their business leads back to your unique strengths, which means you need to know what your unique strengths are. All of that still holds here for Framemaking. So you still need to be sort of on point with what are our unique strengths. But I think, to me, I'm willing to go a little further with this, which is, and it goes back to Cialdini, funny enough, right? It's what's called a value exchange. If you can be the person that shows up uniquely to help your customers feel better, not about you, but to better about themselves, I think we'd all agree on a human scale, Victor, there is massive value in that. Just like there is in personal relationships, right? I like to be the people who are your friends, the people hopefully that you marry or that you date or whatever, the ones you gravitate to naturally are the ones where you just feel like not just I like you, but I like me when I'm around you, right? And what will happen is you will repay that person with your time, with your attention, with your love, with your affection. Not to get that, that freaks people out. We're talking about sales, we're talking about affection, but I think that's true. In B2B, I think it's the same idea. The physics are very similar because we're all still human beings when we buy CRM systems, right? And if you could help me as an individual, help us as a company just feel better about ourselves and the decisions we're making, you're going to be the person I call, not because you're smart, not because you know things, not because I trust you, but because I trust me as a result of interacting with you.
It almost goes back to like the brain psychology of, the survival piece or the safety brain, the amygdala. Yep. It seeks safety. And if I know I'm safe with you, I will reach out to you.
Right. And so we boiled it in where I told you, we don't call it a methodology. We call this a mindset. And because I think that's the thing that we need to, because this is really a mindset shift. It's very much not to be supplier centric, but to be supplier agnostic. Right. And it comes down to something I heard from a friend of mine now, at least a working friend, who used to be a client, is a guy named Brian Smith. Brian Smith is now the CEO of a company called Expedient. Expedient is a cloud computing company. I got to know him when he was head of sales there, and I presented the Framemaking or the sense making work to him a number of years ago. And he's developed that, and they've done some amazing things with it. But I've heard him now do this a couple times, both as head of sales and now as CEO. the way he expresses this, Victor, to his company is in a very simple phrase, which we've, with permission, adopted and adapted a little bit. But it essentially boils down to this: is we have one job at our company. He says our job is to help our customers make the best decision they can in as little time as possible. That's it. That's how we show up. That's how we interact. That's how we engage. We're just going to help our customers make the best decision that they can for their company. Full stop. And every time I've seen him do this, I don't know if it's a plant, if it's on purpose or it's by accident, but there's always a brave soul in the front of the room that raises his hand and says, yeah, but Brian, what happens if we help our customers make a really great decision? And the decision is to not go with us, but to go with someone else. Right. And this is why I love Brian. I respect the bleep out of him, because he's the one that's brave enough as a CEO to stand there and say, you know what? That's the second part of the quote. How do we help our customers make the best decision they can in as little time as possible? Because if we're going to lose, I want to lose early. I don't want to, so, nice. But he said, but I'll tell you, if we show up as our primary posture is helping customers make a great decision that they feel good about, they're going to remember that. And when they make a decision not for us, but go in a different direction, and ultimately it doesn't pay off, we're going to be the first people that they call when it comes time to make the next decision, because we're the only ones that make them feel that way about themselves. And that's with, again, permission and adaptation and adoption. That's the mindset. That's the mindset. Because again, if your sort of mindset is, I got to tell them this, I got to get them to know this, I can do that now as a customer with AI. I can build the freaking spreadsheet. I can build all that. I can find all that. So what's the role that's not just makes you unique from other companies, but what's your role that makes you unique from emerging technology that completely changes the game? And that's your humanity. It's not your knowledge, it's your humanity, right? As someone, actually, it was funny enough, it was at Salesforce, there was a sales rep there I've known for many years. He said this to me the other day. He says, Brent, here at Salesforce, we're doing amazing work with Agentive, and they are, and Agentforce, and all this incredible AI that they're rolling out. But he says, it raises a really interesting question, right? If AI is all about offloading the inefficient, the productivity, the repetitive tasks from human beings, such that we free up human time for higher value activities, it raises a question, which is, what in the world are higher value activities? What is it? What is this thing that is still uniquely human? And I think that's where we are right now.
And by the way, to your point, I think there's a subtle point there, is that most people think that high value activity is quantitative when it should be qualitative.
Yeah.
In other words, it's not about
it's or and. To me, there's an and, not just nor. It doesn't have to be, but again, so much of, we're headed to a place where so much of what you've done as a seller can now be offloaded to AI, and customers can self-serve on it. We were already there with just the internet, right? Now we're there in spades with AI. And everyone's wondering, is this in the introduction, we ask, is this the death of sales as we know it? And we think, well, maybe, but it doesn't have to be the death of sales altogether, right? Yeah. Because you have to ask yourself, what's left? When AI and technology and information can do all those repetitive tasks, what's left is, I think, something actually really beautiful, because it's deeply human. And it's a thing that in sales we traditionally stay away from, because we're all trained in boiler room sort of techniques. But there's a window of opportunity right now for humanity in sales. And I'm all for it. I think that's really cool.
And when I look at what you just said, I have this spectrum in my head between transactional and complexity. Mm-hmm. And what's happening is that AI is moving down from the transactional point and moving towards the complexity piece. I think there's a point where we won't be able to go beyond, and that's the gap where salespeople will always be valued. Much like the dog food example, right? It may seem like a transactional, buy or purchase, but when it comes to a dog that you love, it becomes very complex, and then you make different decisions. So I think there's always going to be that part of it. I wanted to ask you, in this book that the Framemaking Sale, is there anything now that because it's coming out next month, right? September
9th. Pre-order now.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Pre-order now. By the way, I just want to say again, I love your books. The Challenger Sale, I got to be honest, I wasn't a fan of the Challenger Customer between us, but that's because I didn't think it just didn't fit me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But this one, it's okay. I'm back. It's like you're back. The first one's like, Challenger Sale. Yeah, Brent, go. Then the Challenger Customer. Oh, how's all right. How's all right.
I don't know what that was. I don't know what that was. Back. We'll call it the sophomore slump.
Somebody else might read and go, this is a brilliant book. All good. Is there something that you didn't put in the book that you in the last month or so you said, you know what, I wish we would have put more of that? We always have those regrets. Yeah. How's that?
So you've no idea. So you've written books. So it takes a chunk of your soul to write a book, and this is why it took so long to write this one, the break between 2 and now this one, the 3. is I can't go to that well very often in my life because it's actually literally psychologically, physically hard for me at least. Other people, these airport novelists, they crank them out, and I'm not that guy. So I pour everything in the book. I'm sure they do too, but I find writing. I think I'm pretty good at it, but I find it really, really hard. And so I don't know that there'll ever be a new edition. I think it's like the book is the book and it's a moment in time. But the thing is, for anything right now that's a moment in time, Victor, like the world is changing so fast. So one of the things we're doing this week, and we're going to debut them next week for the very first time, is a series of workshops that go along with the book. And so we're building them now. And so when you sit down to write the workshop, there's 4 of them to go with 4 different chapters in the book. It forces you to really get into the tactical nitty gritty detail of like, how am I going to actually train the seller to do something with this? A lot of that's in the book already, but it's a forcing mechanism to go even deeper. And in every one of those 4 workshops, like, oh man, we should have thought of this, or we should have put that in there. There's 100 things now that I wish is in the book.
Come on, give me one, Brent. Give me one. I'm pushing you. Give me one.
Well, just one. I'm just a very basic or a very general one is this point about AI. I'm not kidding. When you go do a word search in the book, the AI is, I think, in there one time, and it's not within this. But I think so. That's the dog food story. I think would absolutely be in the book now if I could have it back. And a lot of it is more tactical stuff. And there's some naming things. Like I mentioned before that we called the phrase that frames. We called it the phrase that pays in the book. I deeply regret that. I will fix that going forward. But the world keeps evolving, and that's what's so interesting. Right? Is that, and someone, when we came out with Challenger, someone asked me, well, like, Brent, what do I do when all sellers at all companies are challengers? Then what? And it's like, well, first of all, I don't think we're ever going to get there. And sure enough, here we are 15 years later, and we're still not even anywhere near that. But at some point, the world changes enough where a strategy that really helps you stand out becomes undifferentiated. And this is what I talk about this a lot in the last chapter. I don't know if you made it there yet, Victor, but the last chapter goes to these eras of differentiation. So the first era of differentiation was better products. We're going to differentiate based on our product being better than your product. Then there's fast followers and rapid replication. So now it's like, okay, we're going to differentiate based on our solutions, right? So now we're going to take these products, put them together, and offer value add where 1 + 1 = 3. And this, when I joined CEB in 2002, 2003, this was the stories. Like, how do we differentiate and go to market with solutions such that we can differentiate ourselves in the market? That kind of ran its course as everyone now built out solutions. And so it became, all right, how do we differentiate based on insight? This is the thought leadership point we were talking about earlier. And I think we're at the point now where that window's not closed by any stretch. I think there's still the meat on the bone with Challenger, for example. But the window of opportunity for differentiation is smaller. It's declining. And so if you're always looking for like, what's the next thing? What's the next big opportunity to stand out? At least for now, I think that's Framemaking. And how long that window stays open as the single biggest window, I don't know. Usually they seem to have about a 5-year, 6-year life cycle, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think every product or service, with the exception of the 1% of the 1%, reaches a point of parity. Yeah. But there is no differentiation. And I always say this in my workshop, you, the salesperson, maybe using Framemaking, become the differentiator. Because 100%. Again, all the products are almost the same. It's not like when I do presentations, I ask people, is your company and your product special? They all say yes, to which I said, no, you're not. Because as soon as you get something different, somebody else will kind of match it. Yeah. So I truly believe it. This gets back to the humanity piece, is that the salesperson has become the only unique differentiator when it comes to selling, assuming all products are all the same as services.
But it's certainly an opportunity for differentiation. But most of us are walking past the biggest opportunity there is to differentiate as a seller, which is this idea of helping customers feel more confident in themselves. We would argue
that's what I mean.
The introduction of the book starts with a very simple question, which is you referenced a little bit ago in a slightly different way, but there's some data that we produced at Gartner right before I left, which is this rep-free experience data. And it was, the last number was over 70% of B2B buyers say that they prefer to buy even large complex solutions without ever speaking to a sales rep at all. And that's because it's your point, Victor, it's because we're all showing up in an undifferentiated way and we're not adding truly any value in the sense of helping customers feel better about themselves. So the heartbeat of this book is a simple question. It's a drumbeat of the book we ask again and again and again. And I think it's a question, whether you read the book or not, it's a question we should all be asking ourselves in sales, which is simply this: how can we become the one seller or the one sales team that customers actually do want to talk to?
Yes.
That's a question worth asking.
Yeah, mic drop. Just leave it there. I mean, because again, by the way, even that number, I'm going to challenge that number, even though I have no data to challenge that number with that 76%, because I think 76% may say they want a rep-free experience. but it depends on the complexity and how you mentioned earlier or at the beginning of the podcast, sometimes there are jobs at stake if they chose the wrong CRM. It's going to impact them going forward. I'm going to give you the last word, Brent.
Okay, here's the last word. I could riff on this for 10 minutes because I have, but I won't do that to you. But I'd simply say this. The data is about reps. It's that customers prefer a rep-free experience, but it doesn't say they would prefer a human-free experience. And I think in that difference is the opportunity.
Love it. On that note, let us wrap this up with Brent Adamson's new book, The Framemaking Sale, comes out September 9th. Again, if you don't know who he is, just buy the book. I mean, there's very few people that I know I'm being serious here. I could name off 5 or 6 authors, and Matt Dixon being one of them. When you write a book, I just buy it because I know it's content quality. So please go out, get the Framemaker Sale. It's available now. Again, it won't ship till after September 9th. And check out Brent Adamson. What is your website?
We'll go live with theframemakingsale.com in about another 10 days or so. And the company we built around this for Challenger aficionados, they'll appreciate this. We built a company called A2B Insight. And A2Binsight.com is the company website. So, and if you have no idea what that means, you go back and read Challenger Customer, unlike Victor, who apparently skipped it. So there you go. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, on that note, thank you very much for joining me. And remember, selling ain't hard when you read the Framemaking Sale and you know how to apply. Take care.
Thanks, Victor.